About to start watching An Evening with John Rhys-Davies. The legendary actor will be talking to us about the secrets to his lasting success, some of his greatest works, including his role as Gimli in Lord of the Rings, and his fascinating childhood in Tanzania and what he believes are the challenges facing Western civilization. The first 15 minutes of this event are free to watch on our YouTube channel, but this live stream is exclusively for Spectator magazine subscribers. So you'll need to head to spectator.com/live to subscribe and view the rest. For just £3 for 3 months, you can access all of our live streams, our daily commentary, our podcasts, and our video content. We hope you enjoy the event.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to tonight's speaker series, An Evening with John Rhys-Davies. Please give a very, very warm round of applause to your host, Toby Young, and your speaker, John Rhys-Davies.
That's right, you've got to have that one, and I've got to have
that's
this
right,
one.
yes, yeah.
It was going to be a comedy of errors. God, I hadn't realized that the homeless problem was so acute in London. But never mind, carry on.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on this rainy night in February to the Spectator's first speaker event of the year. And we have a very, very special guest this evening, who is, of course, the legend and one of the most recognisable. It's got one of the most recognisable voices on my cue card, but I think that's a little bit uncharitable. One of the most recognisable faces in cinema, John Rhys-Davies, probably most famous for his iconic role as Gimli the Dwarf, weirdly, because he's 6'1", Gimli the Dwarf in Lord of the Rings. And you may also recognise him as Salah, the Egyptian excavator in the Indiana Jones films, as well as appearances in James Bond, The Princess Diaries, even a voiceover in SpongeBob SquarePants. The pinnacle of John's career. What you might not know, however, is that John is also has outspoken political views, which we will hear about in due course.
No.
We're going to try and avoid him saying anything that's likely to get him cancelled. So please, when asking questions, please bear that in mind. Don't ask him anything which may lead him to stray into Jim Ratcliffe territory. We don't want to see him permanently unemployed at the end of this event, although John may have other ideas. Anyway, so we're going to hear about his remarkable life and career, and then some of his thoughts on the more pressing challenges facing the contemporary world, particularly Britain. John, you described yourself in one interview as having a schizophrenic childhood. What did you mean by that?
I was born in Salisbury during an air raid. My parents were Welsh, and apparently my mother said, "Good God, Rhys, they're going to bomb the gasworks," and promptly went into labour, thus only half qualifying me to play international rugby for Wales. But that was not to be. And then my father, after the war, my father was in a restricted occupation. He was an engineer at the Wilson Dorset Bus Company. And after the war, he went out to Africa with the groundnut scheme. Does anyone remember the groundnut scheme? Nobody. This is what happened, you see. So, come here, Carruthers. Yes, sir. Did you have a good weekend, sir? A spiffing weekend, Carruthers, my God. And you know what? I came up with a super wheeze. You realize that we in Britain, in this year of 1945, 46, 47, we have a terrible dearth of protein. Oh, yes, sir, yes. I could barely get a steak down last weekend at all. Yes, yes. Well, did you know, Carruthers, that peanuts, monkey nuts, are protein? No, I didn't know that, sir. I did classics. But I didn't know that, yes. Now, where do monkey nuts grow, Carruthers? Africa, sir. Yes, good boy. Now, who owns Africa, Carruthers? We do, sir. Yes, now, this is my specific. Get me a map. West Africa, never mind. Look, find a map with big holes in it, bit empty bits. Oh, Tanganyika, that's a good, spiffing good look. Now let me see. There's a big empty space there. Let's make 100 miles square there, and over there, and over there. Splendid, splendid, splendid. Now, all that useless machinery that we've inherited from the end of the war, and all those useless majors who cannot settle down in civilian life, we can send them out there, and we can grow monkey nuts. We can do the local economy an enormous amount of good, and we can feed England. Except for the fact that all the places that they did actually isolate were quite unsuitable for growing groundnuts. My father took me out on safari once, and he got out of the car and he walked a little bit, and he said, "John, come here, stand here." "Yes, Daddy." "What are you standing on?" "The ground, Daddy." "Kick the floor a little bit." "On a bit of metal, Daddy." "Yes, that is the top of a cab of a Mercedes truck that actually has sunk in the ground in the wet season. It was called black cotton soil, and everything just went into it when it got wet. So it was a catastrophe, really, and a great scandal. It cost about £2 million, which at that time meant real money. And then he became a colonial policeman, and so I enjoyed that wonderful freedom of being a boy in Africa, you know.
And were you at boarding school in the UK, but flying out to Africa for the whole?
Well, then they sent me off to boarding school in England, and down in Cornwall. They wouldn't even let me take a rifle to school. Can you believe it? You know, I mean, it was like going to prison. And the food wasn't any good either. And then in the short holidays, I used to spend time with my grandmother and Auntie Mag, both miners' widows in Wales, 2 up, 2 down, tin bath in front of the fire, you know, a bath on Friday night in the tin bath, and that sort of extraordinary schizophrenia out there. A colonial bungalow, 4 acres, 5 servants, dogs, monkeys, anything else, parrots as pets, and the tiny little Welsh miner's cottage, chapel 3 times on Sunday. The Reverend Tegvan Evans, who had christened my mother, married her, and then christened me when I was there. 43 years in that Congregationalist chapel of Temple Hill. And he taught me theatricality. I didn't understand Welsh, but I'll give you a sample of the sound of the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. Now you know the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven. This was his version of it. Ein tad, arwyth an a nevoedd. And you suddenly get that magic, you know, the way that religion and magic, that incantation is part of prayer as well. A glorious introduction to the power of words and drama. And the very first play that I ever saw at Truro School down in Cornwall, I'm 11 years old, and it's Oedipus Rex. And when Oedipus comes on in that second act, having put his eyeballs out, with his eyes hanging down from his teeth, it hit me like a hammer. And I was a first former, and you weren't allowed to go into the senior library until you were a fourth former. And I went straight to the senior library and found what I was looking for, Aristotle on tragedy. And I read it then and learnt it then, and I still know it. Tragedy then is the imitation of an action, complete and of some importance, acted, not narrated, in language enhanced by distinct and varying means, and through pity and fear, effecting its purgation of these emotions. All my life I tried to work out what that is, but it's marvelous. And I knew then my destiny was to be a new Sophocles. It didn't quite work out that way, but we're working on it,
And you didn't go into acting straight away. You went to University of East Anglia, you did some amateur theatrics
Well,
there.
yeah.
But then you initially became a school teacher, is that right?
Well, when I graduated, I'd married in my last year, and I was waiting for my wife to graduate. So I hung around in East Anglia, and I taught for a couple of terms, and it was interesting. The hardest year of work of my life, that first year of teaching. I'm sure that some of you are teachers here and remember that. Dear Lord, I mean, I'd come home.
I always think when I've seen good teachers teach, I helped set up a couple of schools, that it is a bit like performing on a stage. The ones who are really good can command attention. They have that kind of, what do you call it, kind of main character energy.
Yes.
And they're performing, but you're not just performing for 3 hours, you're performing for 6, 7 hours. So it is exhausting.
Particularly when you're really just an immature late teenager, as I was then. I was intellectually quite unprepared to go to university, really. I was afraid to fail. Therefore, I deliberately failed, which is just an indication of real immaturity, really.
But you then went to RADA.
Then I got a scholarship to RADA. How did I go to RADA? Well, because I knew that I wanted to be a writer, and all actors are out of work for at least 6 months of the year, but I was quite a good amateur actor. I'd founded the Drama Society at UEA. I'd worked at the Madam Market Theatre, so I'd done Timon, I'd done Judge Brack, I did The Revenger's Trap, a number of things. Having already left school with Othello, which you couldn't do now, under your belt. And in fact, when I played Othello, Nigel Terry, who you may remember from A Lion in Winter, nobody loves Prince John, and Excalibur. Nigel was Michael Cassio when I played Othello. So the level of school dramatics at Truro at that time was pretty high. I was quite a good amateur, and I figured I could make it as a professional. So how do you get into the theatre? Well, I don't know anyone in the theatre, but there is one drama school that I know of, and that's RADA. Okay, well, I'm bound to get in. Applied, and out of sheer blissful ignorance, did get in. It was harder to get into RADA that year than it would have been to get into Balliol, Oxford.
Did you have to do an audition? Did you have to?
Oh yes, I had to do auditions, but then after a while, I remember getting into the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Terry Hands was auditioning me, and so I gave him my Othello. But you've got to be, if there are any actors here, don't forget that directors and producers have seen every damned audition in the world. And if you're going to give your to be or not to be, they know that by heart, or tomorrow, or no, I mustn't do that one. So I'd seen Olivier and Redgrave doing Cherry Orchard at
The Old Vic?
No, it was
The National?
Chichester.
Chichester.
And what I thought was, what I'll do is take that soliloquy, take that end of the second act where the professor tells them that he's going to sell the cherry orchard and sell the entire estate, And I thought I'd put that together and just change a few words and make it a soliloquy. And they'd never heard it as a soliloquy, so you're in with a chance, at least they're listening. And that served me quite well as an audition. And of course, I copied Michael Redgrave. Auden, in that wonderful series of lectures he gives about poetry at Oxford, says that a young poet should find a poet that he really likes and admires and try to copy them. Really try to write in that thing. And in the doing of that, the poet will find his own voice. And I think in a way that's exactly what I did as an actor.
And Michael Redgrave was your poet?
He was for that time. And I got the chance of saying that to him once, just to thank him for, and he was rather flattered at that.
Not Richard Burton? He wasn't a role model?
Only met Richard.
Was he a contemporary?
No, he was way before.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, much older than me.
Sorry, of course.
I did meet him once when I was a student, and he was not on best form. He was a little bit drunk, and some fool said, Richard, come here. There's another Welshman here who speaks nearly as well as you do. He chopped me up into small bits, his erudition, the fact that he knew far more, the fact that he had that commanding presence. But anyway, but I worked with Elizabeth, and I loved Elizabeth, and she was marvelous. We were doing Zeffirelli was doing a young Toscanini. Toscanini, when he was a young conductor, took Aida to Brazil, which still had slavery, and played that there before the emperor to try and persuade the Brazilians to abolish slavery. And it sounds like a great idea, but Elizabeth Taylor in blackface doesn't really...
Did she play a slave girl?
No, yes, of course.
Right, yeah.
But she was wonderful, and she showed all the girls in the company the ring, that wonderful ring that he had, which puts me in mind of it. Do you mind me digressing?
No.
All right.
About Elizabeth Taylor?
Anytime you get bored, just say, shut up, change the subject. So I'm working in South Africa with a stuntman, and he was in The Wild Geese with Burton. And are there children in the audience? I mustn't use. I want to use some of the words, but I better not sort of offend too much. And he said Burton was lovely. He'd come into the bar with them every night, and he would sit and chat. And Ian Ewell, this man, and Ian had a very interesting background. He was born in London to a London lady, an East End of London lady, who had married a Lufthansa pilot, and obviously, once the war began, Lufthansa became Luftwaffe. And Mum was killed in an air raid, and he went to live with Grandma, and Grandma was killed in an air raid, and then he was sent off to Barnardo's. He was an orphan. And you can imagine being half German in an orphanage in, 42, 43, 44, 45. As soon as he could, he joined the army and then SAS, and he worked with Mad Mike Hoare, and they were using real mercenaries in this film that we're going to do called The Wild Geese, and so he and Burton got on terribly well, and. Yeah, he used to come to me, John. We were in the bar, and we'd always have a laugh, And one day he came in and he said, Ian, do you know how much money I have spent on that blank woman? No, I don't. I don't. I have spent on Elizabeth Taylor £20 million. Screw me. Richard, I mean, for that, you could have had every woman in the world. Rich laughed at that. Anyway, cut then to about 6 months later. I'm in my apartment in Johannesburg, and it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and the phone goes, you know, and Ian, Richard Button here. How are you? Not too good, actually. Yes, I understand you've just had a divorce, I believe. Yeah, I have actually. My lady left me. May I ask how much it cost you? Yeah, Rich. 176,000 rand. Good God, for that you could have had every woman in Africa. Anyway, but sorry, that's the cleanest one I can tell you.
Very good. Well, we should probably talk a little bit about Lord of the Rings. I imagine there are many fans here. Tell us about getting that job. Why did you audition for the role? We probably didn't need to audition, but why go for a role as a dwarf?
You flatter me. Of course I had to audition. So there's this little chap in New Zealand who'd done 2 or 3 small films. They were good films. But let's face it, anyone in this room could, given enough time, say 6 or 7 weeks, with 2 or 3 actors, you could direct a movie. I mean, as one lawyer told me who fancied himself as a director, you know, you just start with a wide shot, and then you go to medium, and then you're close, and then you reverse it round. And yeah. Well, in a way, that's exactly what film is, but it may be a bit more than that. And so they asked me if I would audition for it, and I thought, New Zealand. Let's see, I've been to virtually every continent in the world, but I've never been to New Zealand. Of course, this is going to be a complete catastrophe. You can't make a film out of that book. So let's find a nice little part, something that'll take me there for a month or so, and then I can go, I can do it, I can come back and continue with real life. And so I auditioned, I think. I mean, I think they just gave me a piece to do, and I think it was the part that John Noble ended up playing. I did it and sent it off, and then about 6 weeks later, I got the request to, would I play Gimli? I said, you are out of your mind. I've just spent 30-odd years in Hollywood trying to be recognized, and now you're going to put me in an immovable prosthetic. Oh, no, John, said my then manager. I said, I'm going to spend hours in makeup. I don't want to spend hours in makeup. More than that, I do not want to tie my life up to do a film that will fail dismally at the box office and then go direct to video. It's nonsense. It's an impossible story to tell. And because I hadn't seen the script yet. By the way, when the script finally turned up, in order to disguise the nature of it, it was entitled A History of the Scouting Movement in New Zealand in 3 parts. But you know, it was they were serious. They wanted me to commit to theoretically 18 months of principal photography, but there were going to be 6 months gaps in it. So you're really talking 2 or 3 years. You know, people have died. I mean, think of that wonderful young singer who was in. Oh dear, I'm having a senior moment. I better not go there. You know, 3 years away from Hollywood. I mean, that's the end of a career, isn't it? Really. So I said no, and my new agency said, John, if you turn down this part, we can no longer continue to represent you, which is a bit of a mean one, really, isn't it, when you think about it? But it was my son, number one son, who had come home from boarding school, locked himself in his room at half term, only coming down for meals, and read and reread Lord of the Rings. I found it interminable. And he said to me, Dad, if you turn down this part, I think you're nuts. And I said, why is that? He said, because in every bookshop in the reading world, there's that much book space devoted to Tolkien. Now, of course, there's that much book space devoted to Tolkien. So I went with some treachery in my heart. I went there to convince myself that this guy had no idea really what he was getting into. Anyone can direct a four-hander or a six-hander with 6 or 7 weeks to do it. But when you're talking about 21 principal characters, when you're talking sometimes about, well, I know there were days when we had at least 1,200 extras. Then you've got the horses, and you've got the people looking after the horses, the crew. It's enormous. And once you get into those big situations like that, if something goes wrong, you are in a hole that you can't get out of. And I've seen those things happen. We got out of one hole when we were doing Shogun in Japan. We were meant to be 3 weeks in Tokyo in the tanks. We ended up being 7 weeks in the tanks. That's an extra month out of a 5-month shoot. And they sent a young man out from Universal, an executive vice president of age of 26, as you know. I mean, you've got to start at the bottom work. And he turned up with this T-shirt on, show business is my life, which was rather interesting because our producer was a man called Eric Bercovici, and Bercovici had form in a way. He was the one who went into the writer's room at MGM, and when everyone was assembled, opened his bag and took out an Uzi and a hand grenade and said, today the writer's view will prevail. But that's another story. But
so when did you get a sense that actually Peter Jackson probably knew what he was doing and you were in something pretty special?
I had 2 weeks before I was shooting. I went to every department to check them out. And in every department, I saw a level of expertise that you would only expect to find in one or two of the great filmmaking capitals of the world. Added to which there was a passion and an enthusiasm there that I've really never found in any other place, because it was new for them too. They knew they were part of something great and glorious, and each one I went to, you'd be astounded by what you saw. There was that time I went into the designers thing, and the phone went, and he said, "Excuse me a second, John." "Really?" "Huh. Yeah, thanks." "Yes." He said, "You know those design prints that we, sketches for what we're going to build and things like that, those engineering prints?" He said, "That was our printer. He's just told me that we've just gone to the 8-kilometer of prints that they have made for this thing." That's quite a lot of design prints, I mean, 8 kilometers of it. Every department was so good, and my heart was sinking, because really what I wanted to do is to go to Peter and say, "Look, Peter, I'm terribly sorry, but I can't be away from home. I've got a rather ill wife and all that sort of thing." But I thought, well, I better watch how he handles his crew and his actors. And I went and watched him answer every question, easily comfortable. His crew clearly loved him. He was just at ease with them. And he'd just got these wonderful, reasonable ways of dealing with them. He'd solve problems. And I realized this little fellow had created an entire film industry to service his vision. And I'm proud to say that 4 weeks later we had a press interview, and everyone was skeptical there. You know, Peter Jackson hasn't got a big movie. You know, oh, Jimmy, not a chance. And I'm proud to say that I was the first person to get up and say, ladies and gentlemen of the press, revise your expectations upwards. 3 predictions. 1, this first film is going to outgross the new Star Wars. Peter Jackson went. Second, these films are going to be the most remarkable and considerable earners of this decade. And thirdly, in 20 years' time, when you look back, you will think, actually, what happened here is that we have made a masterpiece. And all those predictions, of course, next day, newspaper said, actor thinks that Lord of the Rings is going to outgross the new Star Wars. Didn't even get my name to it, just actor. But you could see it was there. And it was there every day. You know, we would solve it. You know, acting is just like any other job. It's solving problems as they come. And if you're a problem solver in life, by and large, things get done. We had one problem. There was one piece of casting that wasn't quite right. It was a brilliant piece of casting, and the actor was wonderful. But he wanted to do it in a different way. And Peter knew how he wanted it. And really, after about a week of contention, you know, basically he had to say, we have to recast this. They had to reshoot 2 weeks of work, and Viggo came in to play you know, the king, really. And by God, that was wonderful casting. Everything was right about that production. The crew, the cast, the script, the casting was superb. You know, there was actually one person, I'm not going to say who it was, whose performance I thought wasn't good enough. And I went to Peter and said, that's a real weak link in this. You know, he's two-faced, he's not strong enough, you know, it's wrong. And Peter said, well, thank you for your opinion, John. And actually then they reshot some stuff and put more energy into it. And it's a very, very wonderful, they blend together, these performances. It was damned hard. That wretched manager of mine, John, makeup is only going to take an hour. They'll get it down to an hour. And I said, you are insane. I know what's going to happen. I don't want to spend my life in a makeup chair, coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you have to be awake, and you have to close your eyes, and then and sometimes you're going to have to do things like that, and you know, like that. You've got to be awake, so you can only listen to music. And everyone's choice of music is such crap. You know, and there was only one unpleasant, difficult person on that shoot, and I wore his boots every day. No, we're going to have classical music. I was a bit of a misery, actually. But that, you know, 5 hours to get it on. And then, normally when you're filming, well, you know, you've been in front of television cameras as well, you know, in between the takes, somebody comes over and goes like that, ready to go again. With me, it would be, right, 20 minutes to, you know, get the prosthetic right again. Everything would slow to a stop. And that damn prosthetic, it is rumored that I suffered from an allergic reaction. That is not true. We were using a medical adhesive, which is hypoallergenic, and I didn't have any allergies. It was just simply that medical adhesive really bonds to the top layer of skin cells. And it's not designed to be taken off every day, because when you take it off every day, you actually take a few of the top cells of the skin. So in the end, all this area around here was that you remember when you fell over when you were a child and your knee had that sort of lobster pink white wetness to it. It was all like that. And it was hideous. And then you get a histamine response, so you've suddenly got lymph being pumped into this area, so the face becomes bloated as well. It was a tough one. My then lover looked at me one day and she said, honey, I don't know how to say this to you, but I can't bear to look at you. I've got to go back home.
Was making the Indiana Jones films with Steven
I hope you're enjoying an evening with John Rhys-Davies. If you want to continue watching, you'll have to be a Spectator subscriber. If you're still not signed up, fear not. You can subscribe in seconds and get 3 months for £3. Head to spectator.com/live and don't miss another moment. That's it for the live stream here on YouTube. We're still in full flow over at spectator.com/live, where you can continue watching as a Spectator magazine subscriber. For just £3 for 3 months, your Spectator subscription includes full access to our website and app, along with a whole host of other benefits, like subscriber newsletters and, of course, our live stream broadcasts. So head to spectator.com/live to watch the rest. What are you still doing here? John Rhys-Davies is sharing amazing inside stories behind his roles in The Lord of the Rings and Indiana Jones. Head to spectator.com/live to join us and rewind to pick up where you left off.